So, as you've probably figured out by now, I am a feminist. Now, to the two of you that haven't unsubscribed, thank you.
We are one in the dark, for you have saved me from sorrow.
Feminism, a range of social movements, political movements, and ideologies that aim to define, establish, and achieve the political, economic, personal, and social equality of the sexes. According to Wikipedia, anyway. It started with the first wave, which was fighting for the right to vote, then moved on to the second wave, which was achieving a better quality of life for women, and then moved on to the third wave, intersectionality, and now a fourth wave is on the horizon. It's a word that probably stirs up emotions in a lot of you. It's quite divisive these days for varying reasons because of the now popular anti-SJW way of thinking, ranging from people who believe in equal rights between men and women but wouldn't call themselves feminists, to straight up incels and misogynists who have fostered a deep, dark hatred for the entirety of womankind, to men who actually believe women are inferior or different or best for certain things and worst for others, to others who think that now it's the men that are suffering. The movement that gave the women the right to vote is now despised by so many, so it begs the question, where did we go wrong? Did we go wrong?
Like the scent of earth in dawning spring, echoes our mother's lay over awakening land.
So, we've gotten a bad rep in recent times, mostly stemming from the belief that feminism, like all other left leaning thought, has gone too far. We are termed the SJWs, or social justice warriors, who are always offended and angry and sensitive and get so worked up about every tiny stuff thing. Now, I'll admit there has been a lack of understanding. I'm going to attempt to clear some of that up, although by no means is one video enough for that. Honestly, the whole anti-SJW mess is a very difficult problem to solve, but I have way too much free time, so I'm gonna do that. So let's have a chat, you and I. Let's talk about something. Let's talk about some things. Get some wine, beer, coffee, tea, anything, blood, anything, and let's have a talk. Chapter 1. Perceived differences and inferiority. The whole anti-SJW pendulum has swung back far enough that people at the very extremes have gone back to believing that women are inherently inferior. That's a frustrating thing to try and debunk because basic observation in the 21st century will tell you that that's not true. But since I have to do this now, I'm gonna try to make a case as to why women are not in any way inferior or even all that different. There are physical differences between men and women. I'm not gonna deny that. Because, if you want so bad to focus on the fact that men have more muscle mass than women, then please, by all means, apply for a position to be a laborer. I'm more interested in the psychological stuff. So, men have bigger brains in size than women, and that's used a lot in arguments for male supremacy. A bigger brain, however, doesn't prove that men are more intelligent, because IQ results for men and women are mostly the same. And I know, is the IQ really a reliable measure for intelligence? Well, that's a whole separate debate, which I'll get into if I want to, but for now, women, on average, have the same IQ as men. But even today, and even in the Western world, there's this inherent bias that men are smarter than women. Men are picked for more intellectual tasks because they are regarded as more capable for them. There are personality differences between men and women, though. On average, women have scored higher on neuroticism and agreeableness factors of the Big Five, and there's also the openness intellect factor, which refers to imagination, creativity, intellectual curiosity, and appreciation of aesthetic experiences. You might think that men have more intellectual curiosity, but the result was that there was no big difference. But if you're going to say that these differences were there because of social upbringing, the interesting thing about this study was that they actually found higher personality differences in Western cultures than in Eastern cultures, where there is actually more gender equality and less focus on gendered roles during upbringing. That's kind of a weird thing for us feminists. Although, for one of those studies, I'll say it was conducted in North America with a racially diverse sample. And while analyzing an Indian American is different from analyzing a white American, it's also different from analyzing an Indian from India. What these studies also found was that there were more differences in personality among women than there were between men and women. So if that's the case, you really cannot generalize anything about women's personalities. Also, these studies were done with the Big Five test. There was one study done with the 16PF questionnaire though, and the results were surprising. Women showed higher amounts of dominance and were more private, shrewd, worldly, and diplomatic than men. This was just one study though. I want there to be more studies using the 16PF scale and also cross-cultural and maybe even the MBTI, but that's just for fun and curiosity. Overall, even the researchers in the studies where they found the differences between men and women say that don't take these results and just go insane with them. Personality difference is no reason to deny a woman access to complete equality. There are other differences between men and women, such as in cognitive tasks and interests, but there's also significant evidence supporting that they might be due to society and culture rather than biological. Basically, whenever you meet someone, completely get rid of the filter that makes you judge them by sex because it's irrelevant. Every person is their own individual, and needless to say, women can be just as good as men in pretty much every stereotypical manly field, and vice versa. I know a lot of men watching this are probably like, oh, I know this. I never thought that women were inferior. But society may have implemented a subconscious bias in which may have shown up at some point. All I ask is to be aware of this when the subconscious bias occurs.
It's a male-dominated patriarchy. It's like, no, it's not. That's not true. And even if it has a patriarchal structure to some degree, the fundamental basis of that structure is not power. It's competence.
There is no patriarchy, but even if there is a patriarchy, it's not because of power, but because of competence. Competence?
Hire a plumber who's likely to be male. It's not because there's roving bands of tyrannical plumbers forcing you to make that choice. And it's the case with almost every interaction that you have at the face of our culture. You're dealing with people who are offering a service of one form or another, who are usually part of the broad middle class, and what you're looking for is the person who can offer the best service, and you can find it. It's not a consequence of being dominated by anything that's tyrannical.
What if I said that the reason why most plumbers are male is because society and parenting basically implement an interest in mechanical activities for boys from a young age and more social activities for girls from a young age? And what if I said that when a girl wants to be a plumber, she's underestimated by both the people hiring for the service and the people who seek the service? They just see that there's a girl and they automatically think she isn't good enough. And discrimination doesn't need to be very outwardly tyrannical in order to exist. It can be deeply embedded biases in well meaning people. That's what we're trying to get rid of as well. Although, even in the West, it isn't just that, it's more than that. Chapter 2 History. It took a lot to get to this point. And when I say a lot, I mean centuries of effort. The word feminism was officially coined by Charles Fourier in 1837, but even before that, certain women had been expressing feminist thoughts. A lot of the problem comes from the Bible, where it literally says that women are the weaker vessel. Mary Estelle, who is a Christian, said that God had created women with equally intelligent souls and the faculty of thinking, and that it was men who had made them subordinate. She also stated that denying women independent thought was an insult to God. This was in England. Up north, you have good old Sweden. In Sweden, you have the Age of Liberty, where the monarchy was losing power to the government. In 1734, Sweden actually gave women some property rights and the right to divorce on grounds of adultery. That was massive. Because England gave property rights to women a whole 148 years later. You know, if I was a Swede, I'd actually be pretty proud of Sweden having feminism and stuff, and Sweden's advances in feminism. The writer Hedvig Nordenflycht, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, wrote a poem speaking for more rights for her own sex, and she published in her own name. Yes, female writers actually didn't use their own name, usually, especially if they were expressing feminist ideas, but she did, and she was admitted to the Order of Thought Builders and was the only female member. And it went on like that for a while. Women had salons where they shared ideas and they kept writing that women deserved equal rights, but that was all what is called proto-feminism. Action began with the suffrage movement. The most notable of this movement were the suffragettes in England, led by Emmeline Pankhurst. They were a different group from the suffragists. The suffragettes were more militant in their actions and were prepared to use violence to increase publicity and achieve their goals, whereas the suffragists were strictly peaceful. Emmeline's daughter Sylvia wanted to appeal to the working class women as well. The suffragettes often got arrested due to their militant tactics, and their hunger strikes were often dealt with force feeding from the authorities. Later, the suffragists focused more on war effort when Britain was in World War I. It worked because that was what eventually led women to get the right to vote, because when men were fighting, women worked in the factories, and that had proven that women are equally capable of contributing to society. This was what led to the global suffrage movement. Despite the fact that it required so much effort to even get the right to vote, some still question whether the patriarchy is a thing at all.
This whole patriarchy thing, I think you have no idea how pernicious and dangerous it is.
Well, no, I don't. I really don't. Go on.
Throughout history have fundamentally cooperated to push back against the absolute catastrophe of existence.
Men and women have cooperated, true, but it's with very rigid roles. The public sphere is for men, and the private sphere is for women. And since it is the work of the public sphere that brings money, it was regarded as more important. And it was a really common thing to think that women aren't so capable of being in the public sphere due to lack of intelligence. Women weren't allowed to own property, weren't allowed to vote, even discouraged from learning how to read and write at one point. A lot of writing says that women were inferior. The role for women was to be a wife and mother. Am I seriously having to explain that sexism has existed? Like, is this it? Like, is this what it has come down to? Like, this is the situation? Like, this is what it has come down to now? Of course, who can talk about feminism without talking about the pill? This isn't that pill, actually. This is just a sugar pill. I don't know. Birth control. I think you and I will at least agree that if a woman doesn't want a kid, she doesn't have to have a kid. Like, overall, women should have control over their own bodies. Can we agree on that, at least? This is a hot issue even today. The common argument that comes from men is, well, if you don't want kids, then just don't have sex. Well, no. Because it isn't just women that get pregnant. It's men that get women pregnant as well. Why are women so afraid of getting pregnant, but men aren't as afraid of getting women pregnant? Historically, women were almost always either pregnant or breastfeeding. Either that or they ended their pregnancies themselves because abortion was illegal. But having birth control changed that. Finally, women had control. We could choose to not get pregnant. Of course, this was opposed by many, including the Catholic Church, because, oh my God, women will have sex! But it was revolutionary. It's a hot topic even today, because recently Planned Parenthood has been in a lot of danger. A lot of the conversation around the issue of abortion also includes the same thing as if you don't want women to get pregnant, then don't have sex. Again, placing the responsibility of pregnancy solely on women. When it takes two people for someone to get pregnant, and the other person is usually a man. Just a reminder. The experiences of middle-class women and working-class women were different. On one hand, you had middle and high-class women fight for the right to vote, better education, and access to meaningful work. Working-class women were factory workers who wanted to improve their working conditions and wanted better pay. Working-class women looked to Saint Simonism, which argued for a union of work in which all classes cooperated to mutual and equal advantage. Our boy, Karl Marx, said in the Communist Manifesto that capitalism oppresses women, treating them as subordinate, second-class citizens in both the family and society. Marx and Engels alleged that a nuclear family is one in which women are just meant to be slaves to their husbands and produce children. They also say that while the gender-based division of labor has always existed, stereotypical male, and female work is equally necessary, and it is because of capitalism that the private sphere is regarded as the lesser work. Marxist feminists believe that if you get rid of private property, you don't just get workers' rights, but also women's rights. Anarcha-feminism builds upon that, in that they address not only the issue of the exploitation by bosses on their workers or governments and the military on their civilians, but also capitalist patriarchy on women. By the way, if it hasn't been obvious by now, if you're a feminist watching this, I hope you know that capitalism is not our friend. Like, remember when Monopoly had that bizarre version where women get more money than men on Pass and Go? Or that coffee shop that got closed because they were charging men more or something? Literally no feminist asked for that. Nobody asked for that. That's just businesses wanting to sell to feminists, not being feminists. I mean, the creators of Monopoly actually stole the idea from a woman. Victoria's Secret, despite all of its rhetoric of women empowerment, isn't feminist. No company that sells that much insecurity is feminist. The big boys at the top want to maintain their power, and part of them maintaining their power is making sure that women don't get access to it. Feminism had an issue of being mostly led by white, middle, or upper class women, and didn't as much address the issues of women of color. When slavery was abolished, white supremacists wanted to completely weed out people of color, and that led, and still leads to, the involuntary sterilization of women of color. Womanism addresses the issue of not just women's rights, but more the mixture of gender, race, and class equality. There are also the unique struggles of women that are part of the LGBTQ community, and those struggles are exacerbated by the ever-loving TERFs. Trans exclusionary radical feminists, or gender-critical feminists, are basically transphobes, perpetuating all kinds of myths about how trans women are predatory men in dresses or gay men or just whatever they find scary for the week. Their main complaint is that trans women actually conform to specific gender stereotypes, and womanhood isn't a bunch of gender roles. And while I do agree that womanhood can't be boiled down to gender roles, is it really that accurate to say that womanhood can be boiled down to a bunch of organs that one happens to be born with? I mean, in a way, we should thank the LGBT community. We should thank LGBT activism because they proved that gender and sexuality is a spectrum and isn't binary, and that most of us actually have some or the other factor that is gender non-conforming. As Margaret Fuller said in 1845, there is no wholly masculine man, no purely feminine woman. Chapter 3. India. So, India happens to be pretty sexist and patriarchal. It also happens to be where I'm from. So, there's that. The most annoying thing about Indian society, and in particular Hindu society, is that there is a lot of powerful women in the religion. Hinduism viewed the divine feminine as the omnipotent force which is present in all the 5 elements. I am the queen, the gatherer up of treasures, most thoughtful and first of those who merit worship. Thus gods have established me in many places with many homes to enter and abide in. Through me alone all eat the food that feeds them. Each man who sees, breathes, hears the word outspoken. They know it not, yet I reside in the essence of the universe. Hear, one and all, the truth as I declare it. Yes, Queen! Hinduism is really confusing. There are so many texts and they contradict each other. Sometimes one text really drives home the point that the feminine and masculine energy is equal and complementary, and the other texts are a bit more patriarchal. In the Upanishads, women are present in philosophical debate. In the Mahabharata, Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, said she lives in those women who are truthful, sincere, modest, organized, devoted to their husband and children, health conscious, patient and kind to guests. She is not in a woman who is sinful, unclean, always disagreeing with her husband, has no patience or fortitude, is lazy, quarrelsome with her neighbors and relatives. But then the Mahabharata also says that misogynists and bigots are sinners and that the daughter is equal to the son. What I can infer from this mess, that traditional Hinduism had specific gender roles, but it viewed both the roles as equal, unlike Western patriarchy, which valued the public sphere over the private sphere. Even in modern society, you'll find every Hindu worshipping the goddesses, but gender roles are very prominent in India. And I hate them. I see them everywhere around me. It drives me crazy. Gender roles make my blood boil. In Indian society, women are considered as the honor of the family, society, or country, whereas men are just men. I don't want to be the honor from a country or whatever. I just want to be happy.
Happiness is the one thing we queens can never have.
Funny thing is, it wasn't always like this. When looking for articles, I came across quite a few that stated that during the Rig Veds, that is 2000 to 500 BC, women in India were free birds that could do whatever they wanted and everything was great and rainbows and unicorns. But that might actually not be so much the case. The thing is that this whole thing comes from the racist colonizers shitting on India because they needed to justify colonizing to themselves. And then the Hindus were like, oh, no, India has this past where everything was great and women were free. The Rigveds do talk about giving property rights to women and them deciding their own husbands and other stuff. And 12 to 15 of the 1,000 hymns are written by women. But there was still patriarchy. There was control over female sexuality, and there is an important factor where it said that women had to conduct rituals in the household, and that was a means of controlling them. When the Rajyas or states began being established, there was one man, aka the king, having coercive power, and inspired by that, men began controlling the women at home. Another thing is that the texts were all written by Brahmins. So they're showing only the privileges of Brahmin women. What was going on with the non-Brahmin women? Well, A.S. Altekar blames the lower caste women for the forthcoming sexism. He says that the lower caste wife began being preferred over the higher caste wife, and that led to mistakes in rituals, and so all women stopped receiving education. That is shitty logic. So, if it was the golden age for women in ancient India, what happened? A lot of Hindus say it was the Muslims, as if the Muslims brought every little detail of patriarchy into India. And all that shit like sati and child marriage was in response to that. But Indian society already was patriarchal. But whatever this Rigved situation is, it is a lot better than what the privileged white women had with them. It got worse in India. India is messy and complicated. Contradictory Hindu texts, accounts of history, Muslims, casteism, the unique struggles of Muslim women in India. Let me simplify it for you, okay? Men and women are equal in every sphere and should be treated equally, and let's do away with gender roles and gender stereotypes. Chapter 4. Sexual assault. What causes it? Well, it ain't the clothes. Let's just get that out of the way. Let's get out of the way that rape is about sex. That people who rape do it because of sexual arousal. It's not about sex, but about power. They want to exert power over the women. You've most probably heard of the most common rape myths, that a woman was asking for it by the clothes that she was wearing or the way she was behaving. They enjoy being raped. Rapists are mostly strangers. Let's address the clothes thing because I've been hearing that for many years now and it's getting on my nerves. If you're a man watching, and I assume not a rapist, have you ever wanted to rape a woman simply because you were aroused? No, I assume. That is because rapists genuinely think that when a woman dresses provocatively, she wants sex, and that if a woman wants sex, it's okay to rape her. They also think that if a woman says no, she actually means yes, and that she's playing mind games. They genuinely believe this shit. Men rape because they have a desire to rape, not because they have a desire for sex. What is seriously annoying is when people freak out about bra straps, and that happens a lot in India. Like, seriously, these little things, these things completely define my birth as a human. Like, I'm a perfectly decent, normal girl. Now I'm the sluttiest bitch in the whole country. I see people in the West fight for free the nipple, and I'm just like, we're still stuck on free the knee and free the shoulder. And don't get me wrong, I don't disagree with free the nipple, especially in the context of breastfeeding. Like, people who have a problem with women breastfeeding in public should never have been breastfed. And it is a double standard that boobs are considered vulgar when they're a secondary sexual organ. You know what else is a secondary sexual organ? Men's Adam's apple. Oh my god, look at that boy. Look at that boy just showing his Adam's apple. Boys are so shameless these days. But like I said, let's just keep free the nipple in the vault right now. I'm not too concerned about it right now. We'll bring it up later. I've seen these fucking boomers on Indian news channels going on and on about our clothing choices and that we're too westernized, blah blah blah. I have never seen any of the same men have the same kind of moral outrage over men literally pissing in public as they have over women wearing a miniskirt. I like this perspective on the clothes thing. It comes from Josh Weed, who's a gay man. A man's sexuality is his own responsibility. He goes on to say how, as a gay man, he has never told another man how to dress just because he's aroused. In fact, I have all my life been in situations where men take all their clothes off right in front of me. And guess what? Even though I have felt aroused, I have never, ever blamed another man for that arousal. My arousal is about me, not him. I love this. A man's arousal is his own damn responsibility. It is not the responsibility of the body that evokes arousal. Also, as a man, imagine this. You're just running casually or taking a dip in River Ganga, and a gay man shouts lewd comments at you or gropes you without your consent. How would you feel? And if he said that it was because your collar button was unbuttoned or that you were wearing shorts, what would your reaction be? Just close your eyes for a minute and imagine this. Researchers found certain cognitive dissonances with the minds of rapists, like women are unknowable. This is the belief that women are fundamentally different from them and cannot be understood, or so they'll be deceptive about what they really want. So she's wearing tiny clothes, so she wants sex. When she says no, she just wants to encourage me further. Guys, if women want sex, they'll just say they want sex. They're not gonna try and send signals like wearing short clothes and say no but really mean yes. Another one is that women are sex objects and that their body language is more important than what they're actually saying. She made those looks, so she wants it. She's just saying no to encourage me. Another one is male sex drive is uncontrollable, and if women don't satisfy their sexual needs, it can build up to dangerous levels. There is also entitlement. Men feel they are entitled to have their sexual needs met on demand, and patriarchal cultures often strengthen that viewpoint. And last but not the least, dangerous world. The world is a dangerous place. Shit happens, so it happens. Just accept it. And an example is I have been wronged, so it is okay for me to do wrong to others. But you know what? Let's say that we listened. Let's say there was a ban on miniskirts and shorts. Women would still get raped. You would say it was the tight jeans and tight top. Let's ban those as well. Women are now only wearing saris. They still get raped. You say it was their waists. Women are now only dressing in salwar kameez. They still get raped. It was because she wasn't wearing a dupatta, which is a genuine thing I've heard. They wear the dupatta. They still get raped. It's because they didn't cover their faces. They do that. Still get... You see... It goes on and on. It'll go on until freedom is taken and taken and taken until women just don't exist anymore. So, what is the right thing to do? It's to teach men from an early age really drive home the point that women are human beings, not sex objects. That they're not just asking for sex or rape all the time. That they're not playing mind games or whatever, and when they say no, it means no. This way, the cultures don't reinforce the cognitive dissonances found in rapists. The Me Too accusations get a really bad rep. The main issue that MRAs have is that it can lead to false accusations. And what? I can't even hit on a girl anymore and not get accusations of sexual harassment. Speaking of false accusations, there's this statistic that's been floating around with anti-feminists that 53% of rape cases in Delhi were false. First of all, before I even debunk that, does anyone look at that and go, like, women in Delhi are fucking psychopaths? Like, I've been pretty bored during the lockdown. I'll just accuse a guy of rape. Yeah, that seems like a good plan. Seriously, 53% of rape accusations are false? So, that's not true. Obviously. The important thing is that the study called every case that was dropped before reaching court as a false claim. The report doesn't distinguish between the women clearly being found to be lying or being pressured into dropping the case, or there just simply not being enough evidence. In an analysis of 460 rape cases that were brought to trial in 2013, what do you think was the leading reason for false rape cases? Do you think it was money? Or some kind of revenge? No. The reason was actually consensual sex being criminalized by parents. Basically, a bunch of boomers can deal with the fact that their daughters are human and have free will and can have sex and would rather cry rape, because what will people say if they found out that she had sex before marriage? Now, that is monumentally shitty. But you do realize that that's not a feminism problem, right? In fact, feminism is trying to fight bullshit like this. If girls have sex before marriage, it's fine and it's none of your fucking business. Let your daughter breathe, for fuck's sake. The actual statistic of false rape cases are between 2 and 6%, maybe 8%. And that's no more than false reports of other crimes. It's actually the underreporting of rape cases that's a bigger problem. A shame with being a victim of rape exists everywhere, but it's a lot more in India, where society is obsessed with a woman's virginity. And there's the aspect of family honor in society that persists. It's the same with dowry cases in India. The statistic says that 80% of the cases led to acquittal. That's not evidence that they were definitely false. I mean, out-of-court settlements are allowed in dowry cases. The actual statistic for false dowry cases is 10%, which compared to false reports of other crimes is high, but it's not 50% or 80% high. Recently, there has also been a conversation around the high number of rapes of Dalit women in India. In India, 10 Dalit women get raped every day. Just like the intersectionality of the struggles faced by women of color in Western countries, Dalit women face discrimination for being Dalit, for being women, and for being poor. And I've seen a lot of people say, a rape is a rape, why bring caste into it? Similar to, what does this have to do with race? Recently, a rape of a 19-year-old Dalit girl was committed by Thakurs, which, for those of you that don't know, is one of the upper castes. She got raped because the men in the question wanted to exercise their power, not over just the girl, but her family and her community. And the thing about this case is that police at first denied that there was a rape, despite the injuries making it obvious. And then when she finally did utter the names and then succumbed to her injuries, the police just burned her body as a cremation at night against the wishes of her family. Like, you have to agree that if she was some middle class, higher caste girl, she wouldn't have been treated like this. But she was, and so many other Dalit women are violated because of their sex and caste, and then don't get the attention or justice they deserve because of it. It happens all the time. The upper caste rape a Dalit woman, and when a Dalit tries to question the way that their caste is oppressed, when they dare to question the way things are, when they question at all. Now, for some of you, this is the moment you've been waiting for. You have probably been screaming at this at your screen the whole video, so here it is. Chapter 5. What about men? Well, what about them? When we say that we want to get rid of gender roles and stereotypes, you think that's only for women? Patriarchy is something that disadvantages both men and women. Iceland, which ranked the highest in gender equality index in 2018, also has the highest life expectancy for men. In fact, all countries which have better gender equality, the men also fare better. The reason why men have a lower life expectancy in the first place is more because of cultural reasons. That is, men are more likely to smoke, to abuse alcohol, engage in high-risk behavior, and have accidents at work. They have more exposure to chemical hazards at work, and they take more risks, because that's what the norms say, and apparently also avoid the doctor. So these bizarre ideals of toxic masculinity, the whole am I gay if shit, is clearly the perpetrator here. It's what makes men's lives harder, and it is what feminism is trying to get rid of. Men with more traditional ideas of masculinity are also less likely to seek counseling and more likely to die by suicide. Although women attempt suicide more than men actually die by suicide 4 times more because they use more violent means, like a firearm. A study also found that young adult men are more likely to be depressed if they hold on to rigid beliefs. And in recessions, male suicide rates climb because the responsibility of the economy is solely on men.
A huge proportion of people who are seriously disaffected are men. Most people in prison are men. Most people who are on the street are men. Most victims of violent crime are men. Most people who commit suicide are men. Most people who die in wars are men. People who do worse in school are men.
Most people in prison are men. Why is that? In 2013, 95% of homicide perpetrators were men, and 79% of homicide victims were men. And no one should simply blame that on testosterone or just men are naturally more violent than women. The actual answer is toxic masculinity. Because boys are taught from a young age that aggression is normal and natural and aren't inhibited from it. Boys will be boys, as the saying goes. Doesn't teach men to control themselves and solve problems calmly. And feminists are against toxic masculinity, just a reminder. And men get raped. Men can have eating disorders. Men can get abused. Zayn Malik actually came forward about having an eating disorder. There's also muscle dysmorphia, which is a disorder which causes a preoccupation with building muscles, similar to the way anorexia is about not being thin enough. And the media has a role to play in the development of this disorder as well. Just like the media glorifies the skinny women, it glorifies the muscular men. And that's not right. Hugh Jackman for Logan went on a 36-hour dehydration diet to make his muscles more visible. As Stephen Colbert said, 36 hours without water is halfway to death. And there are some men that look at those images and feel insecure about their own bodies. Feminists don't have anything against men. It's just that there are certain tendencies that men have because they haven't been through the same stuff that we have. And I try my best to avoid saying stuff like men ain't shit. I try. I try. Mostly because men includes trans men and they don't deserve the hate. Another thing that so many anti-feminists deny is the gender pay gap. The common statistics are that in the US, for every dollar that a man makes, a woman makes 80 cents. In India, men earn 46.19 rupees more than women. A common reason is that women choose to leave the job markets because of motherhood, that they choose to prioritize the raising of their children over earning. Thing is, from an early age, there is a designation of masculine fields and feminine fields. Women in male-dominated fields still earn less than their male colleagues. After motherhood, women are likely to get paid less, something termed as motherhood penalty, and there is no corresponding fatherhood penalty. And the socialization of gender roles has caused the burden of household work and child rearing to fall on the woman's shoulders. So they end up going for lower paying jobs with flexible timings. And even though more women receive graduate degrees than men, they are still likely to get paid less than men. The wage gap is due to both women make less than men in the same job and that female-dominated professions pay less. There is also a racial pay gap. In the US, black women earn 64% of white men's salaries, and Hispanic and Latina women earn 54%. And needless to say, at this point, women of color earn less than white women. Men are also more likely to be in senior roles, and the reason for that is that junior roles includes flexible work hours and part-time options, which is something that women usually go for because that allows them to care for their kids. And like I said before, that's because of cultural gender roles. One solution is to have part-time and flexible times available for senior positions. Men in the UK find it harder to ask for part-time jobs as well. So there needs to be part-time options in the traditional male sectors and in all levels of seniority, so that women and men can do them and also care for their family. And there are studies proving that bosses often don't hire women or don't promote them because of internal biases. I'm not saying that it's necessarily because of some conspiracy to keep women in lower pay, but more of the subconscious biases at play here. And both men and women are capable of having those biases. Conclusion. A lot of people think that there's no issue of gender inequality, but for us women, it's like an everyday occurrence. There's all these expectations and fears around women. All I ask is this. Imagine yourself to be a woman. From the time that you wake up to the time that you sleep, if you're wearing something, it's a problem. If you're sitting or standing in a certain way or showing too much skin, it's a problem. If you eat or drink in a certain way, it's a problem. If you say something or use certain words, it's a problem. If you date someone, it's a problem. If you don't get married, it's a problem. If you have sex, it's a problem. If you don't have kids, it's a problem. If you speak too much, it's a problem. If you don't smile, it's a problem. If you work, it's a problem. If you don't cook or clean, it's a problem. If you're too fat or too skinny, it's a problem. If you have strong opinions, it's a problem. Do you see? There are expectations from men as well, but they're given considerably more freedom, and there being expectations from men as well isn't right. having different expectations, roles, or stereotypes for the sexes is wrong. That is what the patriarchy does, and it's what we're trying to get rid of. And just to reiterate, a more gender equal world is also a better world for men. This whole thing that feminism is against men or whatever is more of a generalization made from like a few insane people going viral on social media and calling themselves feminists. And feminism is something that's very vast. There's a lot of feminist thought that is contradictory. For example, the anti-sex work feminism and the pro-sex work feminism. Like, it gets called one movement, but it's really vast, and there are some fringe movements within feminism, like the TERFs, for example. So join the fight. Be a comrade. Walk with us. What are you, pussy? Fight, goddammit. What, you don't know how to fight? Fight for your right to put makeup on. Fight for your right to cry. Look, mommy doesn't judge you if you cry, okay? Cry, my boys.
Like the scent of wind stroking our skin, echoes our goers lay.